to lead science-based and collaborative efforts to improve the tidal Delaware River and Bay. And while PD is hosting this webinar series, this is an event on behalf of the Urban Waters Federal Partnership at the Delaware River location. The goal of the Urban Waters Federal Partnership is to restore and reconnect urban communities, particularly those that are overburdened or economically distressed, to waterways by improving coordination among federal agencies. And the Delaware River Urban Waters location encompasses 4 major urban areas, and these include Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Wilmington, Delaware, Camden, New Jersey, and Chester, Pennsylvania. So we'd love to learn a little bit more about our audience today. And we have a couple polling questions to get a feel for who's in the room. So Leah, if you could administer that first poll, great. So our first question is, what sector do you represent? Nonprofit, government, educator, student, private sector, or other? All right, great. Thanks for participating. It looks like most folks represent government agencies, and we have quite a bit of nonprofit, some educator, student, and other as well. Leah, if you want to go ahead and administer our second poll. So our second question is, where are you tuning into this webinar from? Oh, actually, second poll today is, how did you hear about this webinar? We have social media posts, PDE web blast, PDE website, from an employer, colleague, family, friend, or other. All right, looks like about half the participants heard about this webinar from our PDE email blast, as well as our website, and quite a bit from some employers or colleagues. Great, thanks, Leah. If we can administer the final poll, where are you tuning into this webinar from today? Great, and it looks like a majority of folks are tuning in from our region, Mid-Atlantic East Coast, and we have a couple folks tuning in from the Southeast Coast as well. Great, so thanks everyone for filling out those polls. And so we have a great lineup of speakers this afternoon to share their work on youth engagement and environmental education. We'll be starting today's program with Kelly Kemmerly. Kelly is a U.S. Fish and Wildlife Environmental Education Specialist at the John Hines National Wildlife Refuge at Tinicum. During her time at John Hines, Kelly developed and grew Philly Nature Kids, the refugee's flagship education program where 4th grade students participate in monthly visits to the National Wildlife Refuge and monthly nature-centered lessons to their schools. We'll then be turning it over to the staff at the Discovery Center, also in Philadelphia, including Kathleen Martin, who's the program coordinator for Audubon Mid-Atlantic. She manages grant-funded projects that engage communities in habitat restoration efforts. These projects work to improve and increase habitat for wildlife, reduce stormwater pollution, and increase awareness and understanding of the importance of bird conservation in the Philadelphia region. Then also from the Discovery Center, we will hear from Bria Wimberly, an environmental educator. Bria joined the team back in January after spending years teaching watershed education in and around the Philadelphia area. Her strengths include aquatic biology and restoration, as well as environmental justice and inclusion. And our final talk this afternoon will cover Brandywine Shad 2020, and we have a great team lined up to speak about that project today, including Frank Hansen, who's a 9th grader at Conrad School of Science. This summer, Frank had the opportunity to work to volunteer with the Brandywine Shad program, and Frank likes to go outside, play video games with his friends, go to Brandywine Park, and take walks. At Conrad, Frank is in the biotechnology pathway and the honors biology class. When Frank's older, he wants to become a marine biologist. And we'll also hear from Jim Shanahan, who is founder and a co-director of the Brandywine Shad 2020, as well as Dr. Ed Hell, who works with the University of Delaware Sea Grant Program as a fisheries and aquatic aquaculture specialist. Then we'll also, so we'll be turning it over to Simeon Hahn of NOAA to give some more introductions and some background information on this program before getting into the Brandywine Shad presentation later on in the webinar. So with that, we're going to go ahead and get started, and I'm going to turn it over to Kelly to kick us off today. So Kelly, you should be able to go ahead and share your screen whenever you're ready.
Hold on. Sorry about that. Presentation just disappeared. I'll be back on in 1 second.
No problem. Thanks, Kelly.
All right, can you see my title slide here now?
We can also see the notes slide too. I think you might be sharing if you want to go into your display settings and maybe share the other screen. There you go, perfect.
All right, so my name is Kelly Kemmerly. I'm an environmental education specialist at John Hines National Wildlife Refuge at Tinicum. We're America's first urban refuge. And today I'm going to be going through our Educate, Engage, Connect model, where we are connecting our community and youth to the refuge as well as other green spaces in Philadelphia. So about the refuge, we're a 1,000 acre green space that's located in both Philadelphia and Delaware counties. And we are federal public lands managed by the United States Fish and Wildlife Service. And we protect Pennsylvania's largest remaining freshwater tidal marsh. And we're located in the Delaware River watershed, and we're a really critical habitat for especially migrating birds. There's 300 bird species recorded annually, about and 80 year-round nesting species. We have about 250,000 visitors to the refuge annually every year for hiking, biking, fishing, kayaking, environmental education programs, archery programs, lots of great things to do. And we were actually created through community action with the purpose. We have some congressional mandates to preserve and restore Tinicum Marsh, which is that freshwater tidal marsh, promote environmental education, and offer visitors the ability to view wildlife in their natural habitat. And our major goals are to educate youth through outdoor exploration as well as jobs, and engage people in our community to promote sustainable communities and connect residents to safe and accessible green spaces. And today, I just want to go over a little bit of the current climate. Right now, over 80% of Americans are living in urban areas. Americans are reported to be spending less time outdoors than in the past. And additionally, 40% of younger Americans think the outdoors is unsafe. So there are a lot of barriers to connecting or deepening connections to nature in our area. And this study is from the Nature of Americans study, as well as the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service Standards of Excellence. So we need to recognize that the way people interact with the outdoors is varied and changing, and we have to adapt to that. So we should offer more ways to engage with nature than just acquiring formal knowledge like birding, which is great, but we also have to recognize that there are other interests, like spending time with family, relaxing. We need to recognize the barriers and the lived experiences of our audience in order to be welcoming and create an inclusive environment. So some major barriers that we see to connecting with outdoor spaces. There can be some physical barriers like cost or perceived cost, transportation and access, dangerous animals or perceived fear of dangerous animals, or a lack of appropriate gear. And then some more cultural or emotional barriers like representation. Who are the staff at your sites? Who are the visitors to your sites? Law enforcement could be actually a positive or a negative depending on your community. Are there people, do you want law enforcement there to make sure that you're safe? Or is law enforcement a barrier because there's a fear there? General community perceptions and fear of adverse interactions. Are people going to look at me funny when I'm there? Are people going to be welcoming and inclusive? Other visitors as well as staff. So we want to acknowledge and work to overcome some of these barriers. And we do that using the Educate, Engage, Connect model as stepping stones of engagement that build on each other. And we're going to start with the Connect here and talking about our community engagement strategies at the refuge. So we're going to kind of review some of our main strategies there to connect folks. So we like to say that we do refuge from the community out. That was kind of a tagline of our refuge manager, Lamar Gore. So really focusing on our community and building outwards from there. And to do that, you have to focus on a target community, really choose a location that you want to work with, and be able to strategically work from there and really understand and know your target community. So our target community is Southwest Philadelphia, a few specific neighborhoods, Eastwick, Consessing, and Elmwood. So a really, really small target community there. So we can really get to know folks and really strategize our community engagement. And one big thing is listening first. So showing up and listening without bringing a lot to the table yourself and just getting to know people and building relationships. We also really want to avoid making promises that we can't keep. So we don't want to come with these big sweeping ideas and tasks. We just want to start out by listening and asking what partners need first and wanting to see that rather than coming in with all these preconceived ideas and fully formed programs. And then we want to be able to align those joint needs and goals. So think about what we can offer and bring to the table, and think about what the community has asked for or identified as a need, and finding a way to mesh those together. And then being able to provide resources and really be an asset to our community. And we want to start slow and just build trust by showing up, going to community meetings, going to community events, and just proving that you're trustworthy and reliable. Also really want to beware of first impressions, especially us with our government uniforms and badges can be a little bit off-putting. So just being aware of how you're coming across and really doing that listening first. And then once we got to know our community a little bit and learned, we wanted to build on that and kind of align some of those joint needs and goals. So one thing we really want to do is connect local green spaces, both physically and like emotionally. So physically connecting them through pollinator corridors and building pocket parks, which are turning community gardens or vacant lots into really usable green spaces in the community. And we work with Audubon PA a lot on that. So you'll maybe hear a little bit more about that work. And then as well as providing transportation, which can be definitely a barrier to connecting to outdoor spaces. So for a lot of events, we provide a free community shuttle that stops at different locations in Southwest to pick people up and take them to refuge events, as well as improving walking and biking paths so that there are multiple ways to access the refuge, as well as some of these other local green spaces. For our free community shuttle, stop at Cobb's Creek and Bartram's Garden often, which are in similar locations to us. It's not too far away. And we want to make sure that the programs that we are having are free and marketed as free, as well as held at convenient times. So really knowing when our community is available to know when is a good time to host our events. So it really all comes down to knowing your audience. And here's just a few photos of some of those things I was mentioning. We have some high school students there building and improving a walking trail. We're working on some projects to improve bike lanes, as well as I've got a picture of our community shuttle there, a bus coming to the refuge for some of our River Days events there. You can see the shuttle schedule on the right, stopping at some community locations, rec centers, schools, and heading to the refuge, Bartram's Garden, and Cobb's Creek. We also really want to increase access to water-based programs. So we do some really targeted kayaking events to get youth on the water as well, which I will mention. And we want to actually get off the refuge and lead programming in our community, in pocket parks, in parks that already exist, but spaces where people already are. So we lead some community litter cleanups, guided walks or bio blitzes. We've even brought our full archery trailer out to some local city parks. Okay. Another really great thing to do is work with already trusted partners like libraries, rec centers, faith-based institutions who already have an audience and are interested in working with you to provide some programming there. We also, in our environmental education programs, make sure that we actually show up and visit schools and can lead programs in students' classrooms. We also, as an agency and as a National Wildlife Refuge, love tabling events, but we really want to make sure that we're choosing those events wisely. We have a pretty small staff, so we want to make sure that we're sticking to our target community and attending events that we know our target community will be at. And then for one of our main things for our engage here, engaging youth, are our high school youth crews. And that was a main thing that was actually identified as a community need or something that our community wanted to see was youth employment. So we work with a partner, Mobilize Green, to implement a high school youth crew program. So it's for anyone ages 15 and up, and students are actually paid to work on meaningful conservation projects in their community. So they're all recruited locally, targeted schools in Southwest Philly, as well as alumni engagement and word of mouth for students who participated in that program. And it operates in the spring, summer, and fall from 8 to 4. And during the school year, it's just on weekends. During the summer, it's Monday through Friday. And students do things like work in community gardens, these pocket parks that I mentioned, as well as on the refuge to build trails and increase access. And transportation is actually provided to students. Usually they are picked up by their crew leaders at a central location for their crew. But due to COVID, we don't want to have a bunch of kids sitting in very close quarters in a van. So students receive transportations in lieu of that actual transportation there so that they can easily get out to the refuge. And there's not just focus on students completing projects. There's also career development opportunities, work on resume building, team building, and leadership skills, as well as opportunities for environmental education. So the students actually get to participate in a lot of environmental ed opportunities, getting out on the water, fishing and kayaking, in addition to the projects that they're building. So it's all about building a conservation mindset and connecting to nature. So even if these students, once they graduate, don't go into a specific conservation career, hopefully they have a mindset. They go into business, law, anything they do, they have this experience and this connection to nature that can travel with them. Another big aspect is our environmental education program that was also noted as a community one, was connecting with schools in the community. So we started our Philly Nature Kids program, which was started in 2014. So strategically, a few schools were identified that were less than 2 miles from the refuge, so really nearby, as well as, so really nearby. They were identified. We reached out to the administration and principals, set up meetings to kind of just open that door and start a conversation about what an environmental education program could look like. So we didn't come in with a prepackaged program. we talked to principals and administrators to see what they would like in their schools. And the 4th grade was identified at a few schools as a key market or audience for our environmental ed program, because that's the first time in Pennsylvania that they are tested in science during their standardized test. So we decided to go ahead and work with the 4th grade at 2 schools in Southwest, Penrose Elementary as well as Patterson Elementary. We met with teachers with a goal in mind of what subjects we knew we could really highlight well, but we still wanted to collaborate and get some joint curriculum with our teachers. So we met with teachers to see what areas in science they struggled to really hit home with their students and could use some assistance with. So we collaborated with teachers, with administrators, came up with a curriculum that's been evolving throughout the years. Again, I said it started in 2014. And so through these 6 years, it's actually really changed a lot. But this is our mission. Philly Nature Kids will foster lifelong stewardship of the environment by engaging students through inquiry-based learning to promote investigation and discovery of their national wildlife refuge and outdoor community. So it really focuses on inquiry-based hands-on lessons. So it's all about building skills in students and creating some independent learners. There's a big focus on science and data, as well as increasing comfort outdoors. And we accomplish this through repeat visits. We see the students every other week for the whole school year. And we really try and have a lot of direct hands-on engagement with nature. So we have 10 classroom visits throughout the year. Every other week, we have a classroom lesson, and then 2 weeks later, there is an actual visit to the refuge. So 10 classroom visits where we can meet students where they are, where they already feel comfortable, can introduce a topic, and encourage students to really push their boundaries, but still provide autonomy. We really want to let students choose the extent to which they participate. We don't want to force students into anything they're not comfortable with. And a strong focus on inquiry, and really having students explore and discover and build skills. So we'll focus on a topic in the classroom, then 2 weeks later, we'll focus on that same topic at the refuge. So there's 9 year-round visits to the refuge. And students, when they're here, we really focus on observing and recording phenology. And we use nature journals for that a lot. We maintain a nature journal throughout the whole year. We use it in the classroom visits as well as at the refuge. And you can see, I've got an example journal there. The 4th graders really have such a capacity for building these skills and really connecting to nature this way. And we use a blank page journal, and they can really be creative. They can collect data, and it's been a really great skill. We also focus on building naturalist skills. So observation, recording data, and we really want to focus on sharing discoveries, building some curiosity, exploration. We like to give students time to really explore and discover within certain boundaries. And then we also learn from representative model naturalists. So we want to use folks that represent our community that have been really great naturalists. So these great role models for students. I have a poster there that we have hanging in classrooms with some great folks like Rue Mapp, the founder of Outdoor Afro, Shelton Johnson, who's an excellent, amazing park ranger, and really making sure that we're highlighting some great things that they've done, and show the students their journal pages as well. We also really focus on youth outdoor skills. We have a big celebration day at the end of the year where students can fish, do archery. We also have a summer camp at the end of the year that's a full week long. Students get to kayak, fish, do wildlife photography and observation. So just really building that connection to nature. And we've actually seen a lot of success in our outcomes for Philly Nature Kids. So we have seen actually an increase in standardized test scores in science. So 9%, there's been a 9% increase at Penrose School in students achieving advanced or proficient in their science standardized test scores, and 11% at Patterson. We're also in the midst of a formal evaluation process. So these are some results from teachers who have reported that they've seen an increase in interest in nature, comfort in nature, awareness of the refuge, interest in the refuge throughout the program before and after they participated in Philly Nature Kids, as well as an increase in scientific inquiry skills, understanding of science content, and retention of science content. And we really want to make sure that we are focusing on culturally relevant instructional practices throughout our environmental education program with our high school crews and with any other schools that visit the refuge. So I'll leave this here. I don't need to read it all, but focusing on strengths, focusing on nearby nature, making it really place-based, student and nature-centered, making sure that there's representation in our program of our model naturalists, as well as our staff. And so all of these work together to build the stepping stones of engagement. We can meet students, work with them when they're young, and they can share with their families, they can build, they have experiences as they grow older. We also do some middle school engagement programs. They can join the high school crew, and there's lots of opportunities for engagement. And one thing that we really want to make sure is that we are being as culturally aware as possible. So knowing ourselves and understanding our own cultural lens personally that we bring to the table. A lot of this I reviewed, but being aware of first impressions, watching our language, make sure that we're using inclusive language, really talking to and building relationships with our community by listening, aligning those joint needs and goals, and making sure that we are aware of our own internal biases. So overall, some key points to bring it all together is it's really critical to be a community asset, to build trust and relationships, and to make sure that your programs are culturally relevant, as well as your instructional practices. All together, it builds relevant programming and connection to nature. And I did put my contact info there if anyone has any questions or wants some more details after the program. So I think I went a minute over time, but that's all I have for you all today.
That was great. Thank you so much, Kelly. So we do have just a couple questions for Q&A before we move on to our next presentation. So Kelly, I'm going to give you maybe one or two questions. There was one that came in about with regard to with free programming, how do you deal with people locking in any spots, when you have a limited sign up and then people don't show up, how do you handle that?
So a lot of our programs, we don't require registration. We find that that can be a barrier. There are a few, like kayaking, where you really need to know the number of participants, or we do some shuttle tours where there's limited seats. And we just focus on a lot of reminders for those, as well as it can help for kayak programs to do really targeted recruitment. So working with groups that already exist so that we don't get a lot of that gap in attendance.
Okay, great. And then another question that came in, somebody was wondering if the Philly Nature Kids curriculum, if it's available online somewhere.
It is not available online. We are working on turning it into a large manual, but I don't have anything I can give you now. If you email me, get my contact information down there, I can share some of our curriculum directly with you though, for now.
Okay, great. So reach out to Kelly if you have any questions about the curriculum. And then one final question before we move on, since we do want to stay on time for our other folks today. How many staff are dedicated to implement the program that you were speaking about today, Kelly?
So the refuge total has 12 staff. Our environmental education program, there are 4 specific environmental education staff at the refuge, but we rely on volunteers and interns a lot too to help teach.
Okay, great. Thanks so much, Kelly. And then for folks, if you had any other questions come in, we'll drop Kelly's email in the chat if you want to follow up with her. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to the folks at the Discovery Center to kick us off for our second presentation today.
Awesome. Thanks, Emily.
Great. Hi, everyone.
All right, awesome. Hi, everyone. My name is Kathleen Martin, and I am the program coordinator for Audubon Mid-Atlantic, based out of Philadelphia. And my amazing coworker, Bria, and I are both here today to share some information with you about the work that Audubon Mid-Atlantic has been doing in the city of Philadelphia and how it specifically relates to connecting youth and students to outdoor spaces and local waterways. So let's get started. So Audubon Mid-Atlantic is the new regional office of the National Audubon Society. We used to be Audubon, Pennsylvania, and now we've merged with another state office, Audubon, Maryland, to be Audubon Mid-Atlantic. And our mission is to protect birds and the places that they need using science, advocacy, education, and hands-on conservation. Audubon achieves our conservation successes across the state of Pennsylvania through the work of more than 30,000 members, 21 local chapters, and a diverse group of partners. At Audubon Mid-Atlantic, we're specifically working within the Delaware River watershed to restore its key habitats and engage its residents in community-centered conservation and educational programming. Within the Delaware River watershed, there are a lot of different landscapes. Some are very rural and forested areas, and some are larger urban centers like Philadelphia, which is the largest city within the watershed. So although we do have colleagues that work out in more of the forested areas, all of the work that both Bria and I do occurs in the city of Philadelphia. And in terms of open space and natural habitat, Philadelphia is very unique among large US cities because it has a lot of open space, a lot more open space than other large cities do. For example, we have over 10,500 acres of city-owned parkland, a national wildlife refuge that you just heard about from Kelly, a state park, and several thousand additional acres of natural habitat in the form of arboretums, preserves, golf courses, things like that. And the city just having these natural spaces isn't enough. We really need to foster the connections between Philadelphia residents and even more specifically between students and other youth to these natural spaces. And that's a really important function and responsibility of our organization. So I'm now gonna hand it over to my coworker, Bria, for her to start telling you about some of the ways that we work to connect youth to waterways and water bodies in Philadelphia.
Awesome. Thanks, Kathleen. So before I get into what we do over at the Discovery Center, I just want to give a little more background about myself. So hello, everyone. My name is Bria, Audubon Mid-Atlantic environmental educator. I'm a Philadelphia native, so I was born and raised in Southwest Philly. I left for college, and then I came back here to teach and see what I can do in my own community. I have my BS in marine biology, and like Emily said in the beginning, really enjoy aquatic education, restoration, and conservation. I grew up drinking, the Schuylkill water, filtered Schuylkill water. So I wanted to learn more about that and what we can do as a community to make it cleaner for everyone here. Another very important thing in my work that I like to do is environmental justice. So the Discovery Center, I don't know if anyone has been there before, but we are located in the Strawberry Mansion community over in North Philadelphia. The majority of the community are Black and Brown folks. So that is our audience, and we want to make sure we provide an inclusive space for them, providing them opportunities and just more general knowledge about the environment and their own specific location as well, because it's very rich in history in terms of like Philadelphia plumbing and our reservoir that we have at the location as well. So here are just a blob of pictures I just found so I can throw up here on slides. Like I said, I went to high school here and I graduated from FIU back in 2015 with my BS in marine biology. Next slide. After that, I spent about 5 to 6 years teaching watershed education with the William Penn Foundation, which is also helping us funding some of our programs as well. I worked over at Fairmount Waterworks, who are also a really great partner of ours in the project that I'm going to announce later. Let's Go Outdoors, the Environmental Leadership Program, which specialize in justice, equality, diversity, and inclusion, and also did a little bit work with Rutgers University. So my duties as an environmental educator, creating and facilitating educational programs. Unfortunately, COVID is here, so we had to adapt to that, and we've created some virtual online resources that we've been working on since April. I'm also working with freshwater mussels, which I'm sure Emily will talk about in the future as well. But at our reservoir, we are a mussel nursery. So we are the home to about hundreds of freshwater mussels that are great for restoration and for ourselves because we need to drink the water. And also community engagement, done some outreach programs. We just hosted our first Pride Nature Walk a couple of weeks ago, so that was very exciting. And we'll see what else comes into play. All right, next slide. So I have a poll question. Emily, I'm not sure if you can.
Yep, we're gonna have Leah administer that right now.
Great, okay, so even more general knowledge, how many people drink water from the Delaware River? Just to get an idea of where people are. Oh, okay, nice. So the answer is 15 million. Over 15 million people drink water from the Delaware River. And that's including PA, New Jersey, Delaware, New York. A lot of people use this water. So we have to make sure it's clean for everyone. And we all have a fair chance of this water as well. So within the Delaware River watershed, we also focus on the Schuylkill River watershed. And we also get water from the Schuylkill River as well. Within our own community, Discovery Center has taught in different schools. As you can see on the picture, the Community Partnership School, James G. Blaine, Gideon, William D. Kelly, Frederick Douglass. So we want to bring that watershed education to this neighborhood and to other neighborhoods in Philadelphia. Pre-COVID, we were teaching, what happens with your trash, or how do we filter the water? So COVID, today, we had to adapt to that and figure out ways to still engage with the youth. So one of our projects that we've done for COVID is our Flying High series. It's a online series you can find on YouTube and Facebook. And it started back in April. We realized, with COVID, we can't have any students here. So we're like, okay, let's bring the education to them instead. So it takes about a week for us to complete one video. And we have a couple of them up there now. So feel free to search and check them out. They are on a 4th grade level, and it's a team collaboration. I forgot to mention this before, but at the Discovery Center, we have a community engagement committee who are local people from the Strawberry Mansion community. And they, we talk to them about what are some things that would be interesting for the community and how we can really engage with them so they can keep coming back and enjoying this space, because this space is for everyone. And yeah, so with our Flying High series, we also talk about stewardship. And actually we'll show that in the next slide.
Yeah, I'm gonna try to play the clip, Bria.
Yeah, see if it works.
We'll see.
Here's just a small clip of one of the videos that we've made. This was for the Earth Day. So fingers crossed if it works. If it doesn't,
Can you hear it?
No.
Oh. don't know how to go back to be able to, share my sound. Yeah, I don't know, Emily, do you have any idea of how to make sure the sound goes through?
Yes, so when you go to your, when you share your screen, you need to select to share the audio as well. But if we can't get it to work, we're happy to share these links out in a follow-up.
Okay, yeah, that's probably
we
a
can
good
do it
idea.
afterwards.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's one of the videos that we have explaining, the background information of Philadelphia. I, for one, was born and raised in Cobbs Creek, and I don't really go out to other green spaces in Philly. And I feel like that's probably the same for other people within this city. So having that general knowledge and feeling comfortable with traveling to these different green spaces is very important. After our Flying High series, we decided to step it up a notch and host our virtual summer camp. It was a learning process, but it was a lot of fun. It was about 8 weeks, and we were able to broaden our audience. Besides people from the Strawberry Mansion community, we were able to get people from Pittsburgh, people from Delaware, from New Jersey. So it was a lot of fun. I have a screenshot of what it looked like. Talking to 9, 10-year-olds about the environment and also trying to navigate through Zoom as well. And with our packages, we had different themes. So one was connecting it back to the water, one was for birding, one was connecting the two together, etc. So yeah, with our virtual summer camp, we try to make it as engaging as possible. So we were using Zoom, we have PowerPoints, we have videos, activities. We mailed materials to the campers so they can do the activities with us. There was a lot of coloring. We were able to mail kits for plants, different feathers, things like that. We had morning and afternoon sessions. And, oh wait, go back.
Sorry.
No, you're right. Morning and afternoon sessions, and there were about 15 kids per session. And we did it for 4 days for one theme. So that's 30 kids a day, 120 kids a week. So we were definitely able to reach out to more kids virtually. Unfortunately, one of the consequences of COVID, but fortunately it helped us, find more people interested in what we were teaching. And here are some of the example slides that we've created. So one of the themes was a water chemistry lesson, and we were able to mail out pH strips and nitrate, and I was able to make little water samples and mail those out to the kids as well, so they can test the sample as I'm doing it back in my classroom over at Discovery Center. Yeah, next slide. Also, example slide, just showing the indicator strips and talking about how you can test for certain things, because you don't just have to use a strip. There's different technology that you can use. And that's another thing that I also want to highlight is, for kids in my neighborhood, sometimes they don't think that science would be a great career route, but it is. And I just wanted to make it exciting and also show them the technical side of it too, because it's not just hard science and math. You're working with different tools, and it's pretty fun. And another slide just talking about the animals that would be susceptible to pollution, especially in our urban area, except for the pufferfish. Pufferfish are not in Philadelphia. Okay, next slide. Now, another way that we engage with the youth is with our Mussels. And this is something that we've teamed up with a lot of different organizations, but mainly started with the partnership with Delaware Estuary. We have freshwater mussels that we are propagating in Philadelphia. They're great filter feeders. Depending on the age and species, one mussel can filter up to 15 gallons of water a day, which is amazing. And these are fresh water. So when you think of filter feeders, you might think of salt water like oysters, which can filter up to 50 gallons a day. But unfortunately, we can't have oysters up here. And freshwater mussels are great because they used to be here in this community as well. So we're reintroducing them, reintroducing native species, and also creating outreach opportunities for youth. So we are creating a program where we're recruiting youth and other people of all ages to come and measure the mussels to see how they're growing, and also measure water quality as well. Next slide. So like I said, this is a project that's being completed by many people. The group is called ARRC, Aquatic Research and Restoration Center. We have Fairmont Waterworks here. They actually propagate the Lochidia and juvenile mussels in their mussel hatchery. If you've never been to Fairmont Waterworks, I highly suggest going. It's very fun. It's also one of the first pumping stations in Philadelphia. The Water Department, Parks and Rec, Drexel, Academy of Natural Sciences, Independent Seaport Museum, and now us, Audubon. We have a 37-acre reservoir on our premises, and it's not used for drinking purposes anymore, but now we're using it to for conservation purposes, for mussels and for other animals in the area. And if you don't know a lot about mussels, mussels have a symbiotic life cycle, which is very unique. They rely on fish for their life cycle. So the fish is collected by the water department. The mussel is propagated at the mussel hatchery over at Fairmont Waterworks. And then it comes over to the Discovery Center, where it will stay there for a couple of years and grow big and strong. So it can go out into the Schuylkill and Delaware River watershed to help clean the water for us and clean the pollution as well. And here is a picture of baby mussels as well. And here are some pictures just showing the process. The picture on the left is from the mussel hatchery. So those little fish in there, I believe those, I can't remember the species, but they have different species like the American eels, shad, white perch, different native species. And on the other side, we have our aquatic scientists from the water department who are able to transport these juvenile mussels into the blue baskets and have them sit and do its thing, filter the water, grow big and strong, so we can put it out into, the Cobb's Creek or Wissahickon Creek, Pennypack. The opportunities are endless. And that leads me to the Mussel Maniacs, our outreach program that we were just starting. The goal is community science. So we want to involve local people with what's happening in their own neighborhood. We are going to provide them tools to measure out the mussels, as you can see in the picture over here, using calipers, jotting down different notes, and we give that information over to the scientists, where they can measure the growth rate and make sure that these mussels are ready to do its thing. It's available for all ages, and the data will be used to reintroduce the mussels. And, oh yes, and one more poll question. So what's the best way to currently recruit youth and young adults for programs during COVID, during a pandemic, during a lot of things happening in this society? Hopefully this will be an easy one. Awesome. Yes, all of the above. We are networking online through Facebook and Instagram. We're finding adjacent programs to collaborate with, like John Hines and other environmental programs, contacting local centers, like those libraries, the rec center, We have a great partnership with Managers Rec. They were actually tuning into our virtual summer camp earlier on in the year. Email subscription, I'll admit, most of us don't check their emails, but sometimes it works. But yeah, all of the above.
Awesome, thanks, Priya.
Kathleen.
Thanks. Yeah, so like I said, my name is Kathleen Martin, and I am the program coordinator at Audubon Mid-Atlantic. And my position really focuses on what I like to call community center conservation. So, which is really conservation and restoration work that happens not at the Discovery Center, but out in the community. That really focuses on involving communities and incorporating their needs. A lot of what Kelly talked about in her presentation as well, into what were, our goals are like conservation-based goals. So combining those together. And the majority of this work that we do does happen in Southwest and West Philadelphia because of the strong connection and strong relationship that we've developed with the John Hines National Wildlife Refuge over the past 5 or 6 years or so. So the specific work that we have completed and continue to work on at a lot of these sites throughout Southwest and West Philly really fall into kind of 2 main categories of habitat restoration and community programming. And I'm just going to give you a really kind of brief overview of some of the habitat restoration work that we've done in Cobbs Creek Park and how that relates to involving youth and connecting them to waterways. So again, within that kind of really broad habitat restoration bucket of what Audubon is working on in Philly, repairing vegetation and wildlife habitat along waterways is really, really important. Maintaining and improving vegetation cover along waterways like rivers, creeks, and streams is really vital because that vegetation serves a lot of different ecological functions, including reducing soil erosion, preventing sediment from entering waterways, providing adequate food and habitat for both aquatic and terrestrial wildlife species, improving the quality of waterways by reducing the amount of stormwater runoff that enters into them. The list really goes on. And these functions are really even more important in our urban areas like Philadelphia, because our waterways tend to be a little bit more degraded than some rural areas because of the amount of development and the amount of impervious surface that has gone into our urban areas. So Cobbs Creek, for example, suffers from a number of different problems, and that's one reason why we've really focused on Cobbs Creek and the Darby-Cobbs Creek watershed in Southwest and West Philadelphia as a whole for a significant amount of riparian restoration work. So the photos that are on the screen right now show you 2 different crews of local high school students. Again, just like Kelly was noting in her presentation, we've worked with them in Cobbs Creek Park, specifically on riparian restoration efforts. So these students have worked with us to remove invasive plant species from around recently planted trees to give those trees the best chances of surviving in the future. They've removed plastic pollution and other debris along the creek, and we're now starting to work with students to replant those vegetative buffer areas as well. So each of these crews has worked through an organization. We worked with the Student Conservation Association and now with Mobilize Green through the John Hines National Wildlife Refuge. They work on the refuge and then they work out in the community spaces as well with us to gain these hands-on conservation and job skills. So then continuing our presence working along Cobbs Creek, Audubon Mid-Atlantic was actually just awarded a grant to start working at Whippy Meadow, which is located along Cobbs Creek and within the park. And with a partner, the Land Health Institute, which is another environmental nonprofit that works in the city of Philadelphia. And this project will really allow us to work at a much deeper level of that riparian restoration that I had just talked about than we had ever been able to work at before. So much of this work will again consist of that invasive plant removal, but will also be followed by a significant amount of shrub and tree planting along the creek itself. So those 2 pictures are pictures looking at Cobbs Creek from the meadow area. So you can see how almost non-existent the riparian buffer area is, and the decent amount of soil erosion that has occurred there, and the amount of plastic pollution that is in the waterway as well. So we'll really be able to beef up that riparian buffer zone, and that'll be really important. And throughout this entire project that's going to be starting next spring at Whippy Meadow, students from local high schools and from the Land Health Institute's group of students known as the Watershed Stewards, they will be working with us to gather data about baseline conditions of the site previous to any of this restoration work that has already started actually this fall, as well as working with us on the restoration work itself. So really getting that hands-on conservation work under their belt, as well as giving feedback on what types of educational programming and community programming they would like to see at the site in the future, and working with us to begin designing some informational signage for the site as well. So really being able to involve youth in these projects just at, from the get-go, from collecting data before work even starts, through hands-on work, and then all the way through community education and community programming is just really exciting. And it's a really, really great opportunity to involve students and youth in these, in these projects that are happening in their own community spaces, and really, learn about the environmental piece of things, the social piece of things, everything that's going on in their communities. So we're really excited to start that project and to continue working in other areas with youth in the city as well. And then I just Bri, I don't know if you want to speak to any of this COVID obstacles. I know yes. Every group has gone through them, but these are just some of the things that we have found that have been kind of difficult, but also that we've had successes with, since everything kind of started this spring.
Yes, definitely. So for obstacles, let's see, what elements of programming were effective? So keeping the kids engaged, definitely trying to, we're over time limit. Okay, I'm gonna be very fast. Sorry, Emily.
Oh, no problem.
Yeah, keeping the kids engaged, using videos, activities, getting to know them. I'm sure, living through a pandemic is very hard, especially for these kids. Mm-hmm. So finding ways to connect them to each other. And now that we are offering in-person learning, we're trying to make sure we're safe and doing it within COVID guidelines. Mm-hmm. What were some of the challenges? Finding the capacity to create online content. Before I was like, okay, this is going to be easy. We can do this maybe every week. It's not easy. We had to learn the programs, figure out who's recording, create a script for it, editing. Editing took maybe hours or a day or two to finish. So that was definitely one of our greatest challenges. And how has COVID impacted our programming? So unfortunately, with the quarantine and shutdown, we lost money and profit and employees. And since then, we have to grapple different positions. One of them includes creating online content. Mm-hmm. So finding that capacity within there. Online programming, we were able to adapt to that, which was a lot of fun. It was a learning journey. It was great. And since we just opened up again, we offer socially distant events, and hopefully we will have more schools coming to the Discovery Center just to use the premises. We can't bring them inside, but they can be outside and use our different, just being able to access what we have over at the Discovery. And yeah, engage youth, but within specific guidelines.
Awesome. I think that's it for them.
Yeah,
that's it for us. Thank
Great.
you.
If you have any questions, feel free to email us.
Yeah.
Great. Thanks so much, Bri and Kathleen. What a great presentation. For the sake of time, we are going to move on to our third presenter for the afternoon, but we're going to link Bria and Kathleen's email down in the chat box for folks that have some questions. And with that, we are going to turn it over to our third and final presentation today on Brandywine Shad 2020. And I think I'm going to first turn it over to Simeon Hahn for some opening remarks. And then I'm going to go ahead and share the screen for this final presentation today. All right.
Okay, thanks.
Brandywine Shad, go ahead and kick us off.
Okay, thanks, Emily. I just wanted to make a couple brief remarks about the Urban Water Federal Partnership in connection to this project. My name's Simeon Hahn. I work for NOAA's Office of Response and Restoration. And NOAA is one of the federal agency leads for the Urban Water Federal Partnership. And we have several projects in Wilmington. And we've had discussions, and Hunter Lott has come to talk about Brandywine Shad at our Urban Water Federal Partnership meeting. So there's a lot of federal agencies that support Brandywine Shad restoration efforts. Part of that support was working with the team to do some monitoring the shad. The shad was getting some even national attention for the Brandywine based on some actions that Frank will talk about. So Ed Hale from the University of Delaware in Delaware Sea Grant helped put together a sampling program for shad, and Jim Shanahan and I worked with that. But we had some youth involved, including Josh Matola, who's a graduate student from Virginia Tech. He's a youth to us old guys. But that ranged also down to Tico, Maynard Jones Jr. and his father, who are in the community, friends of mine, interested in fishing and other efforts, to Frank. So I know I'm speaking for all our sampling team. We're very proud of Frank for his willingness to do this presentation, and he was really eager, enthusiastic person for our sampling team. He showed up and did the work. So with that, I'll introduce Frank Hansen.
Hi, I'm Frank Hansen, as Mr. Simeon said. But so today I'm talking about the Brandywine Shad 2020 that I got to work on this summer. So I'm gonna go to the next slide. And so can we go to the next slide? Yeah. Okay. So when I did this summer, I got to work with Mr. Jim Shanahan and Mr. Hunter Lott. What we're doing this project to do is to restore fish passage to obviously the Brandywine River. And I got to work with NOAA and also the University of Delaware. So the next slide, we're trying to restore like the migratory fish, well, mostly shad, to the Brandywine River. This can help our community by letting people fish more or canoeing more, because the water has definitely got a lot cleaner. And our shad program has been featured, as Mr. Simeon also said, almost naturally. It's been featured in the New York Times and other like Delaware newspapers as well. So in this slide that is coming up, we're talking about like how shad have been important over the years in colonial America. Shad were a very important fish because a lot of people like caught them, cooked them, and ate them. And as you can see on the top, it says Alosa sapidissima. That's the scientific name for shad, or American shad. And a lot of people would smoke them, or like just cook them or fry them and just eat those in like the old times, I guess. So this next graph that we're gonna see, it shows the actual decline in shad over the years. and like you can see that a lot of people have stopped catching shads, have stopped like finding them, which is definitely really bad. So here in this next slide, where this is actually the Brandywine watershed, and this is a large area that stretches up to Pennsylvania, which is mostly in Pennsylvania, and it's also in parts of Wilmington as well, and it connects the Brandywine River or Brandywine Creek into the Delaware River, and and the Wilmington no in the watershed also gives a lot of its fresh like we in Delaware we have a lot of we drink the water from the watershed. So in this next slide, we're looking at all the dams, and these dams are within a very short radius of each other, and these dams are very like problematic to a lot of like migratory fish who are trying to move up the river. Because as you can see, as you can see, the last dam, I don't know if you guys can see, on the last dam, like the last one all the way at the bottom, is one that we removed. So in the next slide, I'll actually show you this dam that has been removed recently. And yeah, so you can see this was removed in 2019, and this is what actually is letting more shad come up to the second dam, which is also stopping them. So if you can go to the next slide. So we're talking about diadromous fish pastures in the Brandywine Creek, as you can see by the name. And so diadromous fish is a fish that spends either half of his life in freshwater and then saltwater, or half of his life in saltwater and goes to freshwater. And some examples, as you can see on the side, are sturgeons, striped bass, river herring, and then obviously shad. And this little picture here is actually a baby shad. And so we can go down here to the next slide. And fish passage is basically fish moving from fish being able to move from place to place or to their spawning areas. Like as you can see, shad go up the river into freshwater to breed, and all the dams that are in the Brandywine Creek and everywhere else are they block off shad passage. So next, we can go to the next slide. And so the Brandywine Creek, this is you can see the map, and it's very close to the Christina River and then also the Delaware River. And you also see this picture of Dam 2. And where the dam is, if you go down like a little bit, we actually sampled there and found like a lot of adult and baby shad. But above the dam, we didn't find any because they weren't able to pass through it. So that shows how of a problem. The only fish that was actually able to pass through is an American eel, as we caught when we were sampling up there, but we never actually caught a shad up on the top part. So we're going up here, and so we sampled shad using this seine net, and as you can see, that's me holding it, and then Tico, and we went into the water and went like a large arc in the water, and then pulled it back out, and then like tried to get the ends together on land. So when we pulled it, the fish wouldn't be able to escape. And actually, in these pictures show pretty good how basically what we're doing. And this was a 75-foot net, I'm pretty sure. But yeah, we caught there was one time we caught a lot of shad, like little baby shads here. So and here's Mr. Ed holding an adult shad, and then there's this little bucket. You can see all the baby shad, and so you're seeing that all the shad are stuck right in front of the dam. Like where we went, we caught all the shad there because they have nowhere else to go. So, and you can see and you know that they're breeding up there because there's also a bunch of babies. So it's like good that we know that the shad are here, but we also need to know that they're surviving and can be able to go back to the ocean. So, and these last few slides. So yeah, so these are some pictures that I have, and so the picture, that's an adult American shad. That's Mr. Ed and Josh pulling the seine net, and that's just actually taking the fish out of the net. So here, in the next slide after the pictures. So this was very important to me because when I'm older, I also want to become a marine biologist, and this was like gave me a lot of experience, and Mr. Ed helped a lot telling me it's like how to identify certain fish, or showing like I guess, yeah, just identifying fish in general, and just showed like different species of fish as well. And I live actually really close. Well, yeah, obviously I live in Delaware, so I live really close to the Rainier River. Actually, it's just right, like where I'm sitting is literally just right ahead of me. So I can just go down. I go down there sometimes to go fishing. This has helped me a lot because the water has been looking a lot cleaner and just better. And I feel like I just think that's really good for the environment. So the next slide, my actual experience was my dad one day just told me I should go help, and I was just like, okay, basically. And then I just started going like every Tuesday during the summer. But I did eventually have to stop because I started school, but I would always go. We pull out the net and test the same 2 spots, and I'd help Mr. Ed count the fish sometimes, and I'd also help go out with the net as well. And then for the last slide, um, these are some of the ideas I had. I didn't really have that many, but I could do like there should be like kids my age with like interest in science stuff could like you could do a project on it or like do a class thing on it. And for the second one, I said kids, you can get like your friends or your cousins to join or whatever, or a sibling. Or in my third idea was a summer camp idea. Like I guess it wouldn't be like a summer, it'd be like a day thing. Like you just like one day, or like I guess like every Tuesday or every 2 weeks on Tuesday, you just go out and we test for shad, and that also be getting us a lot more help because we have a lot of people, but at the same time we could always have more people. And then the last one I did was a river cleanup because I think that'd be really important because I see a bunch of trash everywhere on the Brandywine, and I think it really needs to be cleaned up. Well, and that's just the end of my slides.
That was great. Nice job, Frank. I know we still have a couple minutes for your session. I don't know if Simeon, if you and your team wanted to share any other remarks, otherwise we can kind of move on to wrap up. I wasn't sure if any of the other members of your team had any remarks to say regarding the project.
Yes, Jim or Ed, if you want to open your mics up, if you have anything you'd like to say.
Well, I'd like to say, Frank, you did a great job on this. I'm really impressed how you told the story, and we really appreciated your help throughout this sampling period. It was a little bit tricky, walking out in that water. A couple times, one or two of our team members disappeared underwater for a few minutes, not a few minutes, a few seconds. But it was surely gratifying to see that as a result of the removal of the first dam, that we were able to identify not only shad that had moved in waters that they hadn't been in almost 300 years, but as Frank said, that they were spawning. And I remember on one sampling in particular, what was it? Help me out here, Ed. Was 159 shad we got in it one day?
Yeah, 159 juveniles and 3 or 5 adults co-occurring in the same habitat right above Dam 1, former Dam 1.
There was also a question I saw posted about do we plan on taking out more dams? And yeah, the answer is yes. The plan is to either remove or to provide some sort of fish passage for the remaining 10 dams on the Delaware side of the Brandywine, and as well as after that on the Pennsylvania side as well.
Okay, excellent. We did want to administer just one poll to the participants, just to collect some information from all of you. If your organization is interested in getting involved with Brandywine Shad 2020. So Leah, whenever you're ready, if we want to just administer that one poll. What we can do on our end following this webinar is if you did indicate yes, we'll have your contact info for your organization, and we can share that with Jim to reach out to you for any future involvement. Okay, great. Looks like we had a couple people that are interested. So Jim will get you the contact information after this webinar.
Oh, did you want me to?
Ed, would you? Go ahead, Frank.
There was 2 questions in the thing, and they came up on my thing, so I don't know. So the first one just says, Frank, how did you become first interested in fish in the Rainwater Creek? It wasn't like I was specifically interested. My dad just thought it was like, he just told me about it. I was like, I mean, yeah, because I was always been interested in like fish stuff. So I was like, oh, that'd be cool. So I went and helped, and I just thought, I was like, yeah, I would get involved in that because, I mean, why not? And the second one says, well done, Frank. What is the best way to reach out to kids your age? Is it through school or, I mean, like, I know, like, if I was gonna ask people, I would just say, oh, do you want to do this thing during summer with me? I mean, it's just like fish stuff. Or yeah, school is fine too. You also just ask people, like, if like I can just ask my friends if they wanted to do it or something. But yeah, school is also a good way to do it.
Great, thanks, Frank. I think that is a really good question that was just posed. I don't know if any of the other earlier speakers want to respond to that too. What's the best way to kind of, reach out to kids to get them that are, youth school students to get them involved in programs like this? I'm not sure if any of the other panelists want to speak to that question.
Sure. I could say a couple things, Simeon. So we, Tico and I work, actually coach basketball at the Hicks Anderson Community Center, and there's a lot of kids there. This year's first sampling effort, there was a lot of challenges. People mentioned COVID and other things, but we really wanted to just, try the method. There'll be more sampling in the future of different types as the dams get removed, but we really wanted to take the opportunity and use the seine and do the sampling. And so there was some opportunities working there with Hicks Anderson.
Great, thanks, Simeon. Do any of the earlier presenters want to speak to that too? Kelly, Bria, Kathleen? I think it's a really great question.
Emily, I just wanted to mention too, but one of the things with COVID, and I know Kim Hatchadorian's on, but the Nature Center was working, and there's some efforts that they were leading with also engaging to youth in Wilmington. And we had some plans for event, like a shad day kind of thing, and they're actually working on putting more signage up. Is another thing. The shad day had to be postponed because of the COVID, but those are some other examples of reaching out.
Great, thanks.
Can I mention, there's just a few ways of how we were able to.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so reaching out to those schools were definitely helpful. With the schools within our network that we've been working with in the past, they were able to reach out to parents, and if the parents were interested and the kids were interested, then they would come to our events. Another was the rec centers or libraries. Like I mentioned earlier, Manders Rec Center was already hosting a summer camp, and they were looking for people to collaborate with, and we were available for that. So yeah, looking into different businesses within the neighborhood that focus on youth engagement and wanting to make sure that our youth out here have opportunities.
Great, thanks, Bria.
Hey, Jim, or Emily, if I could, that's a question that I think might be good for Jim about are the dams privately owned, and if the state owned, why is the removal process so slow? If all fishing concerns know that the dams are bad for fish, why doesn't Fish and Wildlife use fishing license money to take these dams down? Or maybe Ed can speak to that as well. And I can add a little bit more information about the funding for the dam removals and where it comes from.
Well, I'll touch on it, I guess, a little bit. One thing is that there is an extraordinary amount of administrative steps that need to be conquered and gone through from a permitting perspective. involving, multiple agencies, both federal agencies, such as the Army Corps of Engineer, as well as state organizations. And in order to do that, there is an enormous amount of analysis and data that needs to be identified in order to do that. And that's one of the reasons why it does take a long time. Thankfully, we have the benefit of the University of Delaware Water Resource Center is also involved in this project, and they've been able to help us move things along actually quicker than they might ordinarily go. But on the funding side, you would think that it's sort of a no-brainer, but there's a lot of projects like this or similar to that, or like the projects of the people who spoke beforehand, and we're all trying to get funding from different sources, and a lot of us go to the similar sources, and so there's just not enough money at any one time to support all these projects. So you have to just keep on working at it to apply for the grants and slowly but surely get the money that you need in order to accomplish your goal.
Emily, if I could too, I was wondering, Ed, if you could just speak a little bit more to the diversity of fish that were found and kind of maybe some of your conclusions or initial reactions to the kind of fish and the amount of fish that were caught on the Brandywine.
Sure. So just for the sake of answering the question, I think there's a mix of dam ownership being either publicly owned or privately owned. But as Jim alluded to, trying to get one of these things removed is a big deal, with a number of different organizations having to be involved and multiple different permitting steps. And so that Brandywine Shad 2020 does a lot of work to essentially facilitate that type of removal. And our project was attempting to document the fish assemblage, so the number of different species that are occurring in this region. And we actually found that it was fairly healthy in terms of the ecological community. We saw pretty high diversity, between 15, 20 species. We saw a yellow perch above Dam 2. And as Frank mentioned, we actually had a juvenile American eel. So there are American eels climbing over Dam 2, which is fairly significant head height. Unfortunately, it's not going to pass American shad, but we did see those at the down dam location. So the way the sampling was set up, we were reporting data essentially below and above dam number 2 to essentially measure what was around and what was making it past former dam 1, so that we could characterize whether or not dam 1's removal was successful for shad. Of course, we documented that what was, and so really pretty incredible, high diversity, a lot of different freshwater species that we encountered, pretty healthy forage fish like satin fin shiners, some of the things in pretty high abundance. So really pretty fantastic find ecologically, in my opinion.
And the study, led by Ed and that Frank and others helped on, is very important on this funding aspect as well, because while we were all fairly certain that what would happen happened, until you actually scientifically measure it, you really can't state that as a fact. And so this study is very important for us as we move forward to get funding to say, hey, look, this really works. When we take down a dam, the shad move upstream. And so we were very grateful for everything that Ed and Frank, helped out on this project.
All right, great. Thanks again, folks. And if there are any other questions or people have any questions for Jim or Ed or Frank, they can put their email addresses in the chat box and they can follow up with you for any other information. But thanks again. And thanks again to all the other fantastic presenters today. We will be having 2 more webinars coming up in this series. Again, this is Connecting Youth to Urban Waterways. The next webinar is covering programming in Camden, New Jersey. This is going to be next week on Tuesday, November 10th from 12 to 1 with speakers from Urban Promise and the Center for Aquatic Sciences. The third webinar in the series will have speakers from the Alliance for Watershed Education of the Delaware River to talk about their fellow program, as well as a presentation from the Delaware Museum of Natural History on Tuesday, November 17th from 12 to 1. And we can go ahead and add those registration links for these next two in the chat box as well from our Urban Waters page on PDE's website. And thanks again for everyone for attending today's webinar. We hope that you found this very informative and engaging with some helpful resources. And we'll be sending out some follow-up emails that include the webinar recording and some links and resources. And we hope to see you at the future webinars in this series. So thanks again, everyone.
Thank you. Great. Very good.